Now, I know I've ripped on James Gunn for the choices he made with the DCU so far, so it's only fair that I go over why we should be very optimistic that he's in charge of the DCU. After watching the first Superman trailer, I know that the DCU is in great hands. Sure, things may not be perfect. I do have some criticisms and concerns about the DCU. After all, Peacemaker is somehow still canon, yet the appearances from the Snyderverse Justice League characters are not canon. But for the most part, I think we should be really excited for the future of the DCU. First, I'll go over my thoughts on the first Superman trailer, and then I'll go over the things that James Gunn has said and done over these past couple years that got me pumped for the future of the DC Universe. But before we move on, please be sure to give a like and subscribe to Trade Group Comics. You do not want to miss out on our awesome content. Now, personally, I have some mixed feelings about the new Superman trailer. Mostly good feelings, but I do have some criticisms here and there. Now, I'll start off with the good stuff. Now, we've known this for a while. Krypto will be making his first live-action movie appearance. In an odd way, Krypto really helps humanize Superman. As we all know, Batman is an ordinary person who does extraordinary things, whereas Clark Kent is an extraordinary person who does regular things. He's pretty much just like your dad, except instead of taking your dog for a walk around the block, Superman takes his dog for a walk around the moon. Having Superman train and build a relationship with Krypto is a fantastic way to make him feel relatable to the average person. I feel as though this is a much better approach than what Zack Snyder did with Man of Steel. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Man of Steel. I honestly love the scenes that Clark had with his parents. I think having his parents helping him deal with his emotional angst was a really smart thing to do. But I don't think fans were ready to see Superman kill General Zod. Now, I get what Zack Snyder was trying to do. He humanized his Superman by putting him in a position where he had no choice but to compromise his moral integrity. He had no choice but to kill Zod, otherwise he would have conquered Earth and destroyed Metropolis. It was a smart thing to do, but I don't think fans were ready to see Superman do that. It's much better to humanize Superman by having him deal with the emotional conflicts that come from training a dog. Plus, let's be real, Krypto is super adorable. He's gonna steal the show. I also think there's gonna be a lot of emotional conflict when it comes to Superman's relationship with the public. From what I've heard, this is gonna be a year 2 Superman story. He's already built a relationship with Lois and the public as both Clark and Superman. And Superman and Lex at least know of each other's existence. What I suspect will happen is that Lex will scheme to turn the public against Superman. Or he'll use one of his science experiments to create a mess that Superman will pretty much get blamed for. Lex always hated the fact that Superman gets more attention than he does, so I can definitely see this happening. To have Superman persevere through this emotional conflict is a great way to humanize the character. I also love the fact that James Gunn is taking inspiration from the greatest Superman story of all time, All-Star Superman. The robot in Superman's Fortress of Solitude looked like it popped straight out of that comic book series, and in an odd way, that brief snippet of that crisis in that war-torn country reminded me of Superman getting stranded on Bizarro World. Even though he lost his powers and was stranded on a foreign planet, he did not lose hope. Kind of like that kid who put up that Superman flag. So to take inspiration from the greatest Superman story ever told is definitely a step in the right direction. What I also like is the fact that we don't really know what's going on in this new Superman movie. For example, we don't really know who the main villain is. Either Lex, the Man in Black, or that mystery orb will be the main villain of the story. Personally, I'm holding out hope that the orb will be Brainiac. I didn't like the idea that Solaris was going to appear as the villain because A, Brainiac is more recognizable to casual fans, B, Brainiac is a classic Superman villain, and C, there's some nice religious parallels that can be made with the character. In Superman stories, there's almost always religious parallels being made. Superman, as we all know, is this Christ-like figure. His origin of getting put on a pod as a baby to escape Krypton before it explodes parallels the story of Moses. For those of you who don't know, Moses' mother had to put him in a basket and placed him in the Nile River to save him from a tyrannical ruler. An interesting comparison can be made between Brainiac and Noah's Ark. God told Noah to build a huge boat and fill it with animals and his family before disaster came. Now, similar to Noah, Brainiac travels the universe to shrink cities from planets and stores it in a ship. Granted, Brainiac does not do this to save others, but to study them and gain more knowledge. But you get the point. I'm really hoping that Brainiac will make an appearance so that there will be a lot of religious undertones in the story. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. I think that the mystery Man in Black will be Metallo. I say this because Superman has a healing factor except for when he's exposed to kryptonite and magic. His body takes a lot longer to recover from those two things. And as we can see from the trailer, he's really banged up. Hell, Superman doesn't even bleed when he gets beat up by other Kryptonians. In Man of Steel, for instance, Superman took a lot of hits from Zod and his army, and he didn't really bleed at the end of that movie. Yes, I get the fact that Man of Steel takes place in its own bubble of continuity, and James Gunn can establish his own set of rules in his universe, but you get the point. It's hard to imagine Superman bleeding without kryptonite in the picture. My theory is that the U in the guy's chest is the opening for the kryptonite Metallo stores in his chest in the comics. And it'd also be a really pleasant surprise if Henry Cavill made an appearance as Metallo. I mean, the guy's face is covered for a reason. There's a theory that he's an evil clone of Superman, but I don't really like that idea because it's easier for Lex to control a robot as opposed to a biological creature. Plus, I couldn't help but notice that there's a lot of tech-based characters in this movie. There's Mr. Terrific, a genius who uses technology to fight bad guys, and there's the engineer who is a technopath, which means she can control technological devices with her mind. Given the fact that there's a lot of tech-based characters in this movie, I got a feeling that Metallo will make an appearance. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. The only thing I didn't really like in the Superman trailer was the cinematography. I like how everything is bright and colorful. There's just something about the action sequences that seems a bit off to me. Say what you want about Zack Snyder, but every single scene in Man of Steel just looked aesthetically amazing. Now let's move on to why we should be excited for James Gunn and the future of the DCU in general. Number 1. Lesser known DC Comics characters will get their moments. Now, personally, I heard a lot of complaints that this new Superman movie feels like a CW production because of the quality of the costumes. I mean, sure, that's a fair criticism, but despite the fact that the CW Arrowverse shows had cheap production costs for its visual effects, sets, and costumes, you just can't deny that these shows treated their lesser-known DC Comics characters pretty well. I'll use Mr. Terrific from Arrow as an example. Even though Mr. Terrific is not nearly as popular as The Flash, Green Arrow, or Supergirl, he still had some pretty great character development. After feeling unsafe after he got mugged by some thugs in Star City, he seeks training from Green Arrow. Yet he struggled to develop his fighting capabilities. Learning hand-to-hand combat was not nearly as easy for him as developing technology. So after getting defeated by villains, he opted to use his strength to make up for his weakness. He developed T-Spears to use in battle to give himself an edge. Now, this character development isn't perfect, but it's still pretty great for a lesser-known DC Comics character nonetheless. And that just so happens to be why I love James Gunn's new direction with the DCU. Not only are we going to see Superman, Batman, and Green Lantern get great storytelling treatment, but we'll also get to see character moments from Metamorpho, Hawkgirl, the new Mr. Terrific, Weasel, Dr. Phosphorus, Frankenstein's Bride, and many, many more. I think one of the biggest criticisms I had with the Snyderverse is the fact that only really popular DC Comics characters got attention. Personally, I'm really glad that James Gunn is going to showcase lesser-known DC Comics characters that even I've never heard of. It makes it harder to predict what he's going to do with the future of the DCU. Personally, I really hope that he gets to do Green Arrow soon because he has the best origin story in all of DC Comics. I swear I can watch that story over and over again. And I'm pretty much just like Oliver Queen, except I did not get stranded on an island. It would be such a slam dunk for James Gunn to adapt a Green Arrow origin story for the big screen. Number 2, he fixed the script problem. Now, recently James Gunn confirmed on an interview that no DC Comics project will be greenlit without a finished script. I don't know about you, but I think this is fantastic news. As a hardcore DC Comics fanboy, I can really breathe a sigh of relief knowing that the scripts are very strong for the Superman, Supergirl, and Green Lantern TV series. It's kind of amazing to think that projects in Hollywood are being greenlit these days without a finished script. It seems like a no-brainer, but the producers at Sony spent millions and millions of dollars on Spider-Verse movies that did not have a finished script, which is just insane. You might as well just light a pile of money on fire if you do not have a finished script for your movie. Having finished scripts for the DCU projects before they get greenlit pretty much confirms that there won't be any delays, and they won't have to pull the plug on their DCU projects when they get announced. Right now, I'm sure that Kevin Feige is regretting hyping up that Blade movie given the fact that it's pretty much been permanently shelved. And it confirms that there's going to be more of an emphasis on quality as opposed to quantity, which I'm sure is what everyone wants to hear in a world where we're getting bombarded with content these days. And the last point that I want to make is that James Gunn's stories always gives me the feels. I think the thing that makes me most excited for James Gunn's vision for the DCU is the fact that his stories are always so character-driven and packed with emotion. Sure, his movies don't hit me quite as hard as those old Christopher Reeve movies or Logan, but they come pretty close. Every single Guardians movie had the perfect emotional climax. In the first movie, Peter beautifully came to terms with the loss of his mother before defeating Ronan the Accuser. He also came to terms with the loss of his father figure, Yondu, in the second Guardians movie. And Rocket beautifully came to terms with all of his past traumas in the third Guardians film. There was even a ton of other moments worth mentioning, like Peter confessing his feelings for Gamora and Rocket losing his friends to the High Evolutionary. If he can get us to care about a walking tree and a talking raccoon, he can without a doubt get us to care about pretty much any DC Comics character. Getting people emotionally invested in the characters makes the stakes feel higher and the storytelling that much better. Personally, I really hate plot-driven stories these days, so it's really reassuring that he's the guy in charge of the DCU. He's got a proven track record of getting us to care about unknown characters like King Shark, so I'm sure we got some quality storytelling coming our way. I haven't gotten emotional watching a superhero movie since James Gunn's last Guardians movie, so I'm personally very excited to see what he has in store for us. But what do you think? What do you think of the next Superman movie? What do you think about James Gunn's plans for the DCU? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to give a like and subscribe to Reverb Comics so that you do not miss out on our awesome content. Stay groovy.